Stay on Syria. Can you talk a little bit about the role of Turkey? Obviously, we were just in the region a few days ago, and there are talks with Fidan and Erdogan. Particularly, there's a Wall Street Journal report about fears of that the Turks are amassing forces, and there could be an all-out offensive in some of the Kurdish areas. Could you comment specifically on that, and more broadly, what you're looking for from Turkey right now?
So we continue to engage with Turkey about the situation in northern Syria. As you know, we worked out a ceasefire for the area around Manbij. That ceasefire has been holding. It had expired. It has been extended into the end of this week, and we continue to engage with the SDF, with Turkey, about a path forward. As we have said publicly, we do not believe it is in the interest of any party to see increased conflict in Syria. We don't want to see any party take advantage of the current unstable situation to advance their own narrow interests at the expense of the broadened Syrian national interest, and those are conversations we're continuing to have with our Turkish allies.
Just to follow up on that, Kobani, you mentioned Kobani specifically. Is that a fear that there could be sort of an assault on that area?
So I'm not going to speak to that specifically. But the concern that we have is broader than just Kobani. The concern we have is to any increase in fighting in northern Syria at this point. We understand the very legitimate concerns that Turkey has about the terrorist threat that the PKK poses. We understand the very legitimate concerns that Turkey has about the presence of foreign fighters inside Syria. And so we're talking to them about those concerns and trying to find a path forward. Ultimately, I can say that what we want to see, and the Secretary has talked about this publicly as well, what we want to see is the establishment of a Syrian national government that encompasses all of the various ethnic groups inside Syria, and at the end of that, you don't have any subnational militias, any subnational groups who are carrying arms under their own banner. And as part of that, we certainly think it's appropriate to discuss the expulsion of foreign fighters.
So you say you're talking to them about their concerns, and you just outlined what some of those concerns are. I mean, what's the path forward? Is there some sort of, do you see some sort of negotiated settlement, some sort of agreement, either involving the U.S. or between the between HTS and the SDF?
So I don't want to get into it publicly because this is still a matter of let's say fairly intense diplomatic discussions. We were able to negotiate this ceasefire for Manbij that included the SDF withdrawing to the east of the Euphrates River. We are in conversation with the SDF, and we are in conversation with our allies in Turkey, and I should say our other partners in the region are in conversation with Turkey about this question as well. This is not just a United States question. And we are trying to work on a path forward that de-escalates tensions, but while we're in the middle of those diplomatic discussions, I don't think I should talk about them publicly. But I also shouldn't understate that this is a challenging issue. It's a very challenging issue. There are long-standing tensions between Turkey and these groups, and so it is not an easy path forward, but it is certainly one that we're pursuing.
Just one more, maybe more the sticks and the carrots. I mean, what would be the consequence if Turkey goes ahead with some operation? We saw that in 2019. How would the U.S. perceive that?
I'm just not going to deal with hypotheticals at this point. We're in conversation with Turkey about the path forward, and I don't want to get into dealing with kind of an alternative scenario that may or may not occur in the first place.
Can I just put a finer point on it? Did the Secretary explicitly warn the Turks not to go into Kobani when he was there last
I am not going to get into private diplomatic conversations, but of course they discussed the situation in the north in some detail. Both in the phone conversations the Secretary had with the Foreign Minister before we traveled to the region last week, and in a number of conversations with the Foreign Minister while we were there. As you know, he saw him not just in Ankara, but again in Aqaba, Jordan on Saturday.
And then more broadly on Syria, Matt, can you give us any more information about communications with HTS? Has there been any more than the few you referenced yesterday? And have they reacted to the principles that were outlaid in Aqaba?
I don't have any further conversations to read out at this point, and I certainly wouldn't want to speak for them in terms of their reaction to the principles that we laid out. I will say, though, that when those principles were not principles that were just endorsed by the United States. Obviously, you saw the Secretary outline them first before we left for the region, but then those were principles that were endorsed by Syria's neighbors, by other countries in the region and other countries around the world. So we certainly think that they're principles that are not advancing the interests of the United States, or not just advancing the interests of countries in the region. They're principles that outline a path forward for the Syrian people, that call for respect for minority rights, call for respect for the rights of women, call for inclusive governance. And they're the type of principles that we believe are important for HTS to show they're committed to if they are truly to lead a government that represents all Syrians.